to get him out and also to retrieve Marie Colvin's body as quickly as possible.
Richard Galpin. Well, we can talk to Abdul Omar, who's a UK-based opposition activist. He joins us from our studio in Birmingham. Thank you very much for joining us. There are reports and suspicions that the attack that killed Marie Colvin and also the French photographer was deliberately targeted on that building in order to get journalists. What do you think about that?
Well, it would be no surprise whatsoever if it was. I mean, whether it definitely was deliberate, you'd have to speak to the regime, but they would never comment, obviously. We know that this was a media hub. We know that a number of journalists were present there and they were using it as the small center of operations. We know that the building took a direct hit with a number of shells. It wasn't a single stray mortar or anything like this. It was a small barrage that fell upon it. And as a result, it could be a reasonable assumption that this was something that the regime had sniffed out somehow and made a direct hit upon in order to cause this damage.
The Syrian regime generally has banned Western journalists from going there. I mean, there have been some accompanied journalists being allowed to visit officially, but generally it's barring them. In spite of that, because of the fact that journalists are prepared to go undercover and risk the dangers that they face as a result, we have been getting a pretty good picture, haven't we, of what is going on in Syria?
Absolutely, there is a continuous and growing need for independent, objective journalism to show what is happening inside Syria. We need international journalists to become witnesses to the atrocities that are happening inside Syria, and we are lucky that there are people that are brave enough, like Marie, to risk their lives and sometimes pay the ultimate price by going in. It is warming to see that, that there are journalists prepared to risk their lives in order to help those in need, whilst in parallel it contrasts with seeing politicians who are not even prepared to risk their seats or their candidacy in doing something to help the people of Syria.
Do you think, though, that what we've seen happening here and those suspicions that the journalists have been deliberately targeted might deter others from going and might make others just leave? I mean, we know that Marie Colvin and her photographer were actually due to leave the country before this happened because of the fears that they might become a target.
Well, the fact is that on the immediate term, so in the next day or two, journalists who are planning to actually go in will have to take things a little bit more carefully. They've understood the seriousness of the situation. However, I have had 2 calls today from independent journalists asking me for help in actually going inside the country. So journalism has, and these journalists have a threshold of tolerance and fear, and those that have a very high threshold are still continuing to go or trying to go inside the country.
Abdul Omar, thank you very much for joining us.